So a couple of years ago, I was trying to figure out what makes wealthy people wealthy or what actually makes rich people rich, as I was trying to think of all the people I knew that were wealthy or rich. And then I realized that I really didn't know that many people that were wealthy. And because of this, I wouldn't really have a good idea of what these people are doing that was so different from what the average person was doing, so as to make them rich, because I just didn't know enough wealthy or rich people. Now, luckily afterwards, I found this book, The Millionaire Next Door, and the author of this book actually spent years finding a lot of millionaires, and then he went on to interview these millionaires to find out what their lives are like and what they were doing. What they were doing that was just so different than what the average person was doing, just to compare the lives of millionaires and average working people. Now, this is probably the first book that I read that really opened my eyes, because I always thought that growing up as a kid or even as a young adult that millionaires were really flashy. They had the most expensive cars, they had the most expensive houses, they had just a lot of materialistic things, and they were constantly blowing money. But this book actually showed what these millionaires were really doing. So the book interviews all these millionaires, and it covers, what kind of jobs they had, who they were married to, how many kids they had, what type of neighborhoods they lived in, and what kind of houses they purchased. It went on to look at what kind of cars they drove. It actually went into deep details, where they shopped for grocery, how much money they spent on vacations every single year. And if you actually have never heard about this book, or you have heard about the book before, but you just haven't read it, I would say go get yourself a copy of this book. You can easily get it on Amazon. I think it's less than $10 or $15 right now. It's very cheap. I'll leave a link below to this book. It's definitely a good read. But this book really explained to me why millionaires are millionaires, and why average people are average, and why some people are average and then they actually make themselves poor. So in this video, I'm going to talk about why the middle class is poor, although there are some middle class people who are actually rich, and why even some rich people, or people that we think are rich, are actually poor or broke. And by the way, guys, if this is the first time that you're coming across this channel or you're seeing me, my name is Eann, and on this channel I talk about ways to make money, ways to save money, ways to invest your money. I talk about bank accounts, credit cards, and just about everything to do with personal finance. So if you like these types of topics in these videos, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. I'll really appreciate it. It helps the channel out a ton. Also, completely free, won't cost you anything. And be sure to subscribe with the notifications on. That way you never miss any of the updates when I post new videos on this channel. Now, before I go any further in this video, I just want to define, based on US statistics, what poor or middle class or rich is. And based on these statistics, if you're making $32,000 or less, you are poor or near poor. If you're making between $53,000 to $106,000, you're right in the middle class area. And if you're making over $373,000 or more, you're considered as rich. And again, this is based on statistics, and I'm not just making this stuff up. Now, beyond these numbers, I can't really say that if you're making over six figures, you're middle class, because there are people that are making $150,000 a year. They're living paycheck to paycheck. If they lose their job, then they would go into debt immediately. So for me, being middle class or being poor, either would be you not being able to save or invest any money after you get your income every single month, or you're not earning enough to take care of yourself and being in debt. And then by being middle class or being rich or upper middle class, you'd have more money coming in than you're spending, whether this is with you just having a really good job or multiple streams of income. But you have more money coming in than you're spending, and so you don't have to worry about falling into debt, and you're not living paycheck to paycheck. Now, this is why you could be making, let's say, $35,000 a year, and you could actually be considered as rich if you don't have a lot of expenses, and if the majority of that $35,000 per year is just free money that you can use to save, invest, or do just about anything that you want to. And on the opposite end, you could be making $100,000 per year, and you could be poor because you're spending $120,000 per year. So the point I'm trying to make here is we have these statistics there that will tell you what's poor or what's middle class and what's rich. But more importantly, it's not about how much money you actually make. It's more about how much money you keep from the money that you make every single year. So now that we've gone over being rich or poor, let's now talk about what will make you poor or keep you poor. And again, this doesn't really matter based on these statistics. What really matters is how much money you keep after you make your money. And one of the biggest things that holds people back is debt, bills, and their lifestyle. Now, the author of the book, The Millionaire Next Door, after interviewing a lot of these millionaires or average millionaires, he found some really interesting things. He found out that the average millionaire has a 9-to-5 job, which was a shocker to me because I thought that millionaires in general, they just didn't work. They just cruised around on yachts all day with bottles of champagne and they just traveled the world and they lived a very luxurious lifestyle, but I was wrong. So the average millionaire has a 9-to-5 job, and also the average millionaire didn't get any handouts. They're actually first generation millionaires, meaning they are the first person to achieve that millionaire status in their family. So that makes it easier for the average person. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky because most of the things that keep people poor or make them poor are things that we actually need. So for example, education, right? If you want to get a good job or you want to make money or good money, you need to learn some skill or go to college or at least do some certificates or something of the sort. So if you go to college, you have college debt, which can weigh you down if you're the average person and actually make you poor or keep you poor. But again, you can go to college, you can apply for scholarships, you can get good grades, you could opt for learning a skill or something that doesn't cost as much as a 4 or 6 year college degree. And if you're able to avoid college debt, or if you're able to have, let's say, a plan to pay it off quickly, then that is going to reduce the chances of you being poor. I mean, the average student loan payment is around $400 per month. If you go to college and you have a part-time job, you could potentially pay that off with scholarships, and that way you can graduate debt-free or very close to debt-free. And again, this reduces the chances of you pushing yourself into poverty or being poor when you get your first job that only pays you $50,000 per year. Now, the same thing goes for buying a car. If you purchase a new car, the average payment right now in 2022 is around $575. So imagine graduating college with this $400 in student loan debt that you have to pay every single month. And on top of that, you now have to pay $575 for your brand new car that you just bought. In your entry-level job, even with your degree, you're only making $50,000 per year and you're spending $975 so far on student loan debt and transportation. And remember, this doesn't even cover the cost of fuel and unexpected expenses that will come with this car. In fact, the author found out after interviewing millions that the average millionaire drives a used car. Now, I know you may be saying, well, Eann, I'm not buying a used car because I don't want it to break down on me. But I actually did some research myself after reading this, and I found out that cars actually come with an expiration date, and usually from most manufacturers, that is 6 years. In fact, if this car is properly maintained, this car could last up to 15 years or longer without requiring any major servicing. So the point is, if you can find a used car that was properly maintained, you'll save a lot of money by not having a $575 car payment every single month. And you can use this car for years without having any issues. And that is something that I currently do because I drive a 8-year-old car. And I bought this car when it was 6 years old. I paid almost $6,000 for it. And the MSRP on the car, brand new, was over $30,000. Now, I've had no issues, and most likely this car is going to last me for at least a few more years. And I'm going to definitely save instead of having to spend $575 every single month on a new car. Now let's talk about the other expenses, and these expenses are all going to add up, which makes you realize that you could be making good money and you could still be poor, or you could be making just $35,000 a year and you could be rich, and the next cost is housing. Most people spend around 40% of their income on housing. Now, when I say housing, I'm not talking like rent or mortgage and utilities. I'm just talking about the mortgage or the rent payment, and that alone is 37% on average of a person's paycheck. Now, on top of all this, there is the pressure to keep up with the Joneses. So you may be quite fine, you may have a really nice house or a nice apartment, but then your neighbor has a nicer car or a newer car, so you get rid of your car that works perfectly fine for a newer car that costs you more money, or you get rid of your apartment or your home that works perfectly fine for a nicer one or a more expensive one that costs you a lot more money. This could even be simpler. You could have a simple iPhone like me. I have an iPhone 10. It works perfectly fine, but because I'm trying to keep up with the neighbors, I go ahead and I throw my iPhone 10 in the trash and I go spend $1,500 on a brand new iPhone 13 Pro when I really didn't need it right now. So let's go ahead and look at this, right? If you're making $50,000 per year or thereabout, based on these statistics, you are middle class, which is okay. But if you have all these bills on top of it, then you might not actually be middle class. You may actually be very poor. So if you're making $50,000 here, this means that you're making roughly $4,160 per month. If you go ahead and you subtract that $400 student loan debt, and you go ahead and subtract that $575 for that new car that you drive, then you go ahead and you subtract 40% of your income for housing costs. And remember, this doesn't even include insurance on that car or maintenance or fuel. And for the house or apartment, this doesn't include your utilities or bills. So 40% off $4,160 per month is going to be $1,660. And this means that you'll be spending a total of $2,630 or thereabout. And this doesn't include utilities, food, and other expenses that you need to survive. This means that you only have around $1,400 to pay for your insurance, pay for healthcare costs, pay for food, and then by the time you take care of those costs, you may not even be left with $200 to $300. So just because you're making what these statistics say is middle class income doesn't mean you're actually middle class or you're upper middle class. You could actually be poor because you got all this debt and all these payments. Now, let's talk about things that keep people rich or make them rich. And so in this book, based on all the millionaires that were interviewed, the author found that the average millionaire invested at least 20% of their income. And these people were investing on average about $10,000 or at least $10,000 every single year. So if you're making $50,000 a year, this would also be $10,000 per year. Now, if you put $6,000 or $6,500 into a Roth IRA and then the rest into a taxable investment account, at the end of 30 years with a 10% return, you'll have just over $1 million in that Roth IRA and around $700,000 in your other investment account. Now, another interesting thing the author of the book found is that the average millionaire owns their own home, and it was a high percentage. I think it was over 97% of them that owned their own homes, and these weren't the fancy mansions that you would think of. These were just the average middle class homes in middle class neighborhoods. And they also found that the average millionaire pays off their mortgage in around 11 years and not 30 years. So maybe Dave Ramsey is right. Maybe he's onto something when he says that you should pay your mortgage off in 15 years and not 30 years. And you can debate the pros and cons of this, but the average millionaire pays off their house in about 11 years. Now, this is actually really good because if your house is paid off, which is usually your biggest debt, now you have more money to spend on saving, investing, or just for fun. You literally have more money from the same income to do anything you want to do with it. Now, the book also said that the average millionaire officially becomes a millionaire at around 57 years. And this means that it actually takes time to build wealth. And it's probably not something that's going to happen overnight or just in a year from now. Also, the most important thing that I took from this book is that the average millionaire does financial planning, and they set aside time for planning their personal finances at least once per week, and they take this very seriously. Now, if I were to sum this up, it's really simple. The average millionaire simply spends less than what they make, and they buy things that they can afford or things that they can pay for cash so as to avoid payments, and all the extra money that they have, they invest it or they use it to purchase assets and not liabilities. So this is why you could be middle class based on these statistics. You could be making $65,000 a year as a single person and be middle class, but you're actually poor because you're spending $80,000 a year, and you could be considered poor by these statistics by making, let's say, $35,000 a year, but you're only spending $20,000 a year, and so you're actually rich or you're going to be rich. So comment down below and tell me what you think about these statistics versus my way of determining if you're rich or poor or even middle class. And also let me know if you read this book, The Millionaire Next Door. And if not, there's a link down below. You can go and get yourself a copy. This is a very good book to read. And if you guys want to talk to me one-on-one, you can of course drop a comment down below. I'll respond to your comments, or you can message me on Instagram. The link is down below in the description. And with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found some value in this video. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys very soon in the next one.